Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? After 2 days? How are you after last night? When I left last night, there was a hardcore group on that side that I think left a bit later than me. Okay? So I hope you're all well. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak at the conference. As I think you said, because apologies, my French and my German is not very good. I was here 4 years ago at the same conference, and I'm really going to present an update on the study that we did on the serial winners. Now, before we do that, because you've been down there for 2 days, and you're all coaches, you're all competitive, I'm going to give you a chance to become a serial winner today, okay? We're going to have the first ever Swiss championship of rock, paper, scissors, okay? But let me explain how this is going to work, okay? And I'm going to need Philippe for this. You're all going to come, in a second, you're all going to come forward into this area here, okay? And only one person can survive, okay? The international rules for rock, paper, scissors go like this. So you put your left hand out there, and then you go rock, paper, scissors, shoot. If that's a draw, so we go again, rock, paper, scissors, shoot. So I win that one. When you win the game, the person you were playing against becomes your follower, your fan, okay? And they come with you looking for the next victim. And you have your hand up, so they know you're a winner, okay? So you're looking for someone else and you play them. Rock, paper, scissors. If you win the game, the person you played against and his followers or her followers go behind you as well. Until in the end, we've only got 2 people with about 100 people behind them going to the death, okay? So when we've got the last 2, let's stop there because the final will be a bit different, okay? Have you understood the instructions? Are you sure? Okay, do we need to repeat the instructions or no, we're good? So I'm going to ask you kindly to come forward and start looking for games until we've got only 2 people left, okay? And when we got 2 people left, stop and let me know who they are. Come on, let's go, let's go. Can we play the music? Okay. So, serial winners. Coaching a team or an athlete to an Olympic or World Championship medal is a massive achievement for any coach. Winning a gold is probably the pinnacle of most coaches' career. That's the top end of their career, okay? But winning gold multiple times over 20 or 30 years with different athletes or different teams in different countries, that is the prerogative of a very small and select group of coaches. Some of them, they're on the pictures. Now, between London and the Rio Olympics, we were very fortunate to closely study 17 of these super coaches and 23 of their athletes. And we wanted to know not only what they do, because that is just literally the tip of the iceberg, okay? But actually everything else that we never get to see. Why they do it. We wanted to understand the types of personalities, drives, and motivations that allow for this enormous success. And we also wanted to understand some of the leadership behaviors, the leadership styles that facilitated this enormous achievement. Because it is not normal. When we were putting together the list of coaches, we ended up with 30 names. At the time of doing the study, Pep Guardiola, who everybody would say is a serial winner, at that time he didn't qualify for the study. Because at that time he'd only coached 1 team. He was still at Barcelona. Okay? So that's the level of the coaches that we had in the study. Multiple gold medals at the highest level over a sustained period with different teams and different athletes. But we wanted to really go deeper than that. Now, however, we still wanted to check, because this was the first time that we were able to access such an important sample of the super winners, the serial winners, that we also wanted to understand a bit more about what they do. And when we asked them the question, what do you think has allowed you to become a serial winner? And we asked the coaches, and we asked the athletes as well. All the replies came into one of these three categories: vision, people, and environment. All they do revolves around three areas. And we're going to go one by one to start with. So what's a vision? It was fascinating, really. I walked into the office of this German coach 2 weeks after the London Olympics. And at that point, he said to me, Sergio, this is really easy. All you need to know is where you want to go. Okay, and in my case, he said to me, and I was gobsmacked, I know that my athletes have to be in peak performance level on the 16th of July at 3 p.m. in 2016 in Rio de Janeiro. And I know that to have a chance to win the gold medal, we have to go 5 seconds faster than we did in London when we won the gold medal in London. So all I'm doing at the moment, right after London, I'm trying to work out where those 5 seconds are going to come from. And I don't know yet if they're going to come from the athletes, the equipment, my training methods, but that's all I have to work. I have to have the vision to look into the future and understand what it's going to take to win next time. And then I have to break it down and work backwards until we achieve that. And lo and behold, on the 16th of July at 3 p.m. in Rio de Janeiro, they won yet another gold medal. Fascinating. But now, we have to understand, and you understand this better than anybody, that high-performance sport is a very complex picture. There are so many moving pieces. But as coaches, if we want to plan for the future, what we learned from the serial winners is that they looked at this complex picture and were able to break it down into simple components. But not only that, they were able to then prioritize which components would give them the biggest chance of success. Because you know this. If you try to do everything that you could do, you end up doing nothing. So we call that simplexity, which is within your resources, whether that's human or capital, what can you do? And how are you going to prioritize those resources to make the most of your athletes and the performances? And once you've really planned that, you just go into action planning. But that planning doesn't have to be fixed. Okay? As the German coach said to me, my plan is like the motorway. I know where I'm going and I know which motorway is going to take me there. But I know that sometimes I'm going to have to leave the motorway because I have to put petrol in the car or because I get a flat tire, but I know where to go. I know where I need to go, back to the motorway to get to the destination. But because of that, I'm going to have to review and adjust a lot of the things that I do along the way. So understanding where you're going, prioritizing, and then planning and reviewing all the time. So what about the people? We're all coaches. We coach people. We don't coach machines. And the serial winners constantly said to us, it's all about the people. Now, they were also very honest. And when we asked them what's allowed you to become a serial winner, first thing they all said, literally all of them, 17 of them said, oh, I've had great athletes. I've been a winner because I've coached fantastic athletes. But the one thing they took the credit for was selecting those athletes. Because you just don't select the best athlete. And this is particularly even more important in team sport. You select people that are going to fit with the group, with the culture and values of the group, and that you're going to be able to work with. And that applies not only to the athlete, but also to the staff. The serial winners were very keen on anybody in the technical or sports science support staff, they had to fit with the culture. And they would prefer someone that knew less, but was able to fit with the culture and over time learn the job, to someone that was very good already, but that didn't fit with the culture. Once they had all the people that they wanted on board, they talked about developing belief. And they wanted 3 types of beliefs. They, first and foremost, wanted the athletes and the staff to believe in the coach. And they went out of their way to really make sure that the athletes got that sense of trust on the coach. But then they wanted the athletes to believe in themselves. And they also developed lots of strategies to make sure the athletes were growing all the time and feeling like they were able to achieve what they wanted to achieve. And finally, they wanted to develop belief in us, in the group, in the power of working together for a common goal as opposed to working individually. And whether you are in a team sport or an individual sport, when you've got a disruptive group of people where they're not all pulling together, it is a difficult thing to manage. So they were really keen to avoid that by developing this common belief. Now, one thing that wasn't a surprise, but it was a surprise in the sense of how common it was, is that point number 3 there. That what serial winning coaches felt was more and more complex going forward was this idea of managing the high performance team. You're probably in this boat yourselves. When you started coaching, it was you and your athletes. As you progressed, some of you now will have 3 assistant coaches, a video analyst, a nutritionist, a physiotherapist, a psychologist, a performance manager, a performance director, a chief executive, a press official. That now has become a massive part of the job of the coach. We are no longer just about putting cones on the floor and running drills or running practice. But again, most of the times in coach education, we don't see this area. And we have to learn it as we go along. And interestingly, I don't know if you were in Benoit Campar's talk last night, because he was saying, and Benoit was one of the coaches that we interviewed for this, that actually he learned all this idea of management from his time in motor racing. Before he went back to judo to coach, he ran his own motor racing team, where he was the rider, the pilot on the bike, but he also was the guy trying to get the money, the guy organizing the trips, the guy contracting people. And then he brought all that experience into coaching judo. But most of us have had to learn that as we went along. So that's people. And finally, in this area, they talked about the environment. Once we have the vision of where we want to go, and we've got the right people on board, we need to make sure that we develop in an environment where those people can realize the vision. And the characteristics of that environment were very clear. And it was clear to the eye, really, clear to see. High expectations and demands. That was the first one. I went into some of these training centers, and the moment I walked in there, I knew I had to behave in a professional way, because everybody else was. So that high expectations and demands didn't come from, sometimes you walk into high-performance centers and you see all these nice pictures on the wall and quotes by Gandhi and people like that. They really weren't into that much. They were much more into a lift culture. A culture that when people walk into the environment, they either take the culture in and fit in with the culture, or they leave very shortly after. Okay? Now, before they leave, what coaches do in that environment is they provide the right amount of challenge and support. And as coaches, that's really important. Imagine that your athletes are high wire artists on the high wire. And your job is to keep the tension of the wire at the right level. Because if you challenge too much and it's too tense, they're going to fall. But if you don't challenge enough and the wire goes slack, they're going to fall as well. So that really, really difficult balance between challenge and support was something that particularly the athletes highlighted about these coaches. They really felt that their coaches were very good at keeping that middle ground between challenge and support. And that led to this idea of the greenhouse effect, where the climate coaches were creating in that environment was constantly supporting growth and constantly helping the athletes to flower, if you want. Now, a big part of that was this idea of no stone unturned. And the coaches were way out of their way to make sure that they could find every little edge. And I'll give you an example. There is this, it comes from a winter sport in the Netherlands, this coach. And he spends a lot of his budget shipping a container around the world, wherever they go for training or competition. And in this container, there is all the weights for the training that they use in the Netherlands. And the reason why he spends money shipping this container around the world is because he's got everything calculated to such an extent that he doesn't trust the weights in the training centers they go to. So he needs to know that this person is lifting 25.5 today, 23.3 tomorrow. So he actually spends money shipping that container around the world. That's an extreme example. But you can find lots of those, really. And very importantly, because again, I think we're not very good at this sometimes, coaches, this idea of managing upwards. As coaches, we're normally very comfortable managing down. So we are happy to deal and influence our athletes and our staff. But we're not very good managing upwards, trying to influence the performance manager, the performance director, the chief executive of the organization, even the international federation. And the serial winners constantly refer to this, that they wanted to really manage upwards. That if they had to create an environment where these people could realize the vision, that environment had to be the best it could be. And the people that are going to make that possible are above you, not below you. So that you really have to push up and be brave and be ready to pick up a fight with the people above you. So that's vision, people, and environment. Okay? And a lot of those are external behaviors. So we're still at the level above the iceberg. But we want to dig a bit deeper. Okay? It was interesting that Jean-Pierre Egger this morning also used an iceberg. And what he said that I didn't know is that 6 to 10% of the mass of the iceberg is what we see. So we've got 94% under the water. So that's what we try to do, to try and find out what that 94% was about. Now, I'll be honest with you, okay? When I started the study, I had a very clear preconception of what I thought I was going to find out. And maybe that's because I've watched every single American sports movie that a middle-aged man can watch, okay? Netflix, Amazon, wherever, okay? I've done them all, multiple times. Any Given Sunday is my favorite movie of all time, okay? I could recite the speech at the end. You want me to? No, maybe at the end, okay? Life is a game of inches. And the Al Pacino is good as well, eh? It's the Spanish flavor there, but never mind. Anyway, moving on from Al Pacino. I thought that these coaches would be a cross between Count Dracula and the Wicked Witch of the West. Okay? People that would be selfish, people that would do anything in their power, sell their soul to the devil to get a chance to get their hands on the medals. But actually what we found was somewhat different. We saw some of those traits, but mostly what we saw was a group of people that were quite comfortable moving along a leadership continuum that we called driven benevolence. Okay? And I will explain what that means in a second. But before I do that, I want to give you a health warning. Okay? Customer advice. It would be very, very stupid of me to tell you that there's a single profile of the serial winner. We interviewed 17 coaches, and they're all different. Okay? And they do things in a different way. And even within the same coach, they will do things differently in different situations, in different contexts, and with different athletes. So all we're trying to do is try to isolate some principles that might help you reflect on your own coaching. Principles that seem to be common to everybody, but that they may manifest themselves differently for every coach and for every situation. Okay? Now, let's define driven benevolence then. And we define it as the relentless pursuit of excellence, balanced, but a genuine desire to compassionately support others, and perhaps more importantly, oneself. Okay? So let me put that into a few more words for you. We didn't find any lone wolves or any crazy, maladapted individuals. We didn't find any Al Pacinos. Okay? Actually, 16 out of the 17 coaches had been married for 20 or 30 years with children. Now, let me come clean here. We couldn't establish if they were happily married. Okay? That would make for a completely different study. Okay? And we haven't had the funding for that study yet. Okay? But actually, I'll give you an anecdote there. One of the coaches said to me, because I was questioning, wow, so how did you manage that? You know, because he was saying to me, every year we spend 250 days away from home. How did you manage to keep your marriage going? And he looked at me like, what do you mean? Precisely, we've been very happy because I was away from home 250 days of the year. If I've been at home every day, it would have been a disaster. Okay? But really, we found coaches that, I'll be honest, I was expecting giants with 7 heads. Okay? And we found relatively normal people with relatively stable lives and with a very, very normal personality profile. Okay? We ran personality tests with the coaches and then with the athletes to see what the athletes thought about the coaches, and their opinion was very close. So they were relatively stable. There was, like I say, there was no Al Pacinos in there. We actually found just coaches that were very capable of moving along this continuum from being very driven, hard, determined, okay, and very benevolent, really sympathetic of their athletes. We found athletes that spoke about their coaches as if they were big brothers or mentors or even parents. And we found coaches that were as comfortable pushing their athletes really hard as they were sitting down with a cup of coffee with them to talk about their family life, their love life, their finances, their job prospect in the future when they retire. So in sum, we found coaches that were able to be like chameleons, moving along to fit the situation, the context, and the needs of the athlete. So, this idea of being driven and benevolent, where does that come from? Why do coaches behave like that? It was clear. These coaches had a very strong philosophy, and they knew what that was. They had done their homework to really understand themselves and their values and beliefs. Okay? And we know this as well because when you ask the athletes said exactly the same thing. Okay? And maybe some of this was brainwashing. Okay? But I genuinely believe that the main thing is that these guys were genuine. Okay? And 3 main factors came in there into values and beliefs. First, these coaches always use the athlete as a compass. When they're going to make a decision, the decision has to be for the benefit of the athlete. Okay? So rarely these coaches will make a decision only for their own benefit. And the athletes know this. And what the athletes were saying is that they always felt the coach had their back, that they could trust their coach. And that really released a lot of energy that they could put into training hard, because they didn't have to worry about their coach. They trusted their coach, because their coach had a very high moral stance. And the athletes always talked about respect, loyalty, honesty, trust. And again, this is important because if athletes don't have to worry about the coach at this level because they completely trust their coach, that frees up a lot of energy that they can use for something else. Okay? Which is basically training hard and getting on with the athletic life, if you want. But then we had another surprise. Okay, I just talked about this idea of being away from home 250 days of the year. Okay? And yesterday, during dinner, I was sat to someone next to me on this side, someone there, someone opposite me. 200 days a day away from home, 230 days away from home, 250 days away from home. Okay, but the serial winning coaches still said that they felt they had a good work-life balance. Not only that, they felt that was fundamental to their success. And it makes sense. Really, perhaps the first condition to becoming a serial winner is to be in the game for long enough. Because if you don't last long enough, you're never going to be able to have that seriality. Okay? And it is ironic, isn't it? You know, I've been a high-performance coach. We look after everybody apart from ourselves. We're constantly telling the athletes, rest, recover, and we are sleeping 3 hours a night. Looking at video, planning sessions, scouting this, whatever. And the coaches said, yeah, you have to do that sometimes, but you have to find ways to have a much better balance for yourself, for your family. So something that I think is worth thinking for all of us. That really has made a massive impact on me personally and the way I, both in my coaching, but also in if you want, my academic career, my full-time job. Okay, so let's now go into what goes into being driven on one side and what goes into being benevolent. So we found 5 factors around being driven. And this one is similar to what we said about the environment. Unwavering high standards. It's all about being great all the time. And what does that mean? Like I was saying to you, it's not about things written on the wall. It's about doing things every day. And it's about the coach leading by example. When we ask the players or the athletes, what is the main ingredient to the culture? It was the coach and the actions of the coach. Trust me, your athletes see you and watch you much more than they listen to you. So your actions are much more important than your words. The coaches said that one thing they always did was the moment someone reached a certain level, or a team reached a certain level, they raised the bar and took it to another level. There was no complacency, okay? Unless it was motivated by injury or because they needed a rest period, there was no complacency. Every time they reached a certain level, they moved up to the next level. Constantly challenging. And there was an element of perfectionism, okay? Think about this guy shipping that container with weights all over the world. Okay, and it's nearly pathological. Okay, it could work against you, but it's keeping that balance. But they're always striving for perfection. And part of that is controlling the controllables. So anything that could be perfect should be perfect. In sport, unfortunately for us, a lot of things we can't control. Okay, at best we can hope to minimize them. But we can control them. However, there are a number of things that tend to be related to organization and logistics that we can always have under control. And these guys were really strong on this. So much so that we came up with this catchphrase. I don't know if you've got this in German or French, but it's this idea of mistakes against blunders. So let me explain this to you. A mistake is a genuine mistake. You're trying your best, but sometimes you get it wrong. And the coach said, that's fine. We can deal with that. If a member of a staff or an athlete makes a mistake that is genuine, is part of the game, that's fine. But a blunder is a mistake that could have been avoided. It's a careless mistake. They have no time for that. And if you make one blunder working with these guys, you're already on the blacklist. If you make 2, you're no longer on the list. Okay? Everything should be perfect. So unwavering high standards. Second, this idea of having a high sense of purpose and duty. These coaches were doing this and trying to win for something much bigger than themselves, for a lot of them. And I'm going to give you an example. This coach, you'll be wondering, why is there a £5 note on the screen there? I interviewed, by the way, that's Queen Elizabeth, okay? And And I went to interview this British coach, 75-year-old, been coaching 50 years, loves his country. And when I'm asking him, why do you do this? Why do you want to win so bad? And he looked at me like this. And I was terrified. And I was like, you don't get it. He said to me, you don't get it, do you? What do you mean? And he said, let me explain it to you. And he reached into his pocket and brought a £5 note out. And he pointed at Queen Elizabeth and he said, that's who I work for. Okay, never forget that. I'm doing this for Queen and country. And I was like, and I was laughing at that point. And he looked at me again like, why are you laughing? And I stopped laughing straight away. Because he really meant it. Okay, and that is an extreme case. But this guy, right? So the same evening, I interviewed his athletes. Guess what they said to me, the athletes? As soon as I walked in there, they went like, did he show you the £5 note? And I was like, yeah. This guy carries the £5 note everywhere in his pocket, just so he can remind people, who do we work for all the time? So that's an extreme case. But there was a real feeling of, we're doing this for something bigger. We've got a responsibility, but also responsibility towards the athletes. The same German coach that I was talking about before said to me, I feel really responsible for the athletes. For most of them, they've got one chance to get a gold medal. I'm going to have many, he said to me, because I'm going to coach for 30 years or more. So I've had many, many chances, but they only have one chance. And I can't screw it up for them. I've got to do it for them. And there were some other coaches that, as they put it, they had the helping gene. It's amazing. Out of 17, we had around 10 that came from families that were teachers, or they worked in the health professions, nurses or doctors. Amazing, really high percentage. Okay, teachers, and they said, one of them said, I was always going to be a coach. I did a degree in law, but just to keep my family quiet. I wanted to be a coach. I had the helping gene in my blood. So that's a high sense of purpose and duty. And they also have a pathological desire to win. They need to win. They really are like Hannibal in terms of winning. But they don't know why. They say that I need to win, but I don't know why. But then when you ask them questions, they do know why, okay? Out of the 17 coaches, only one of them, so let me start again. 14 of them had been Olympians themselves. But only one of them had managed to win a medal, okay? So they had a lot of unfinished business. And coaching was their way to atone, to make up for that. And they had this real strong need to prove themselves. They really needed to prove themselves. And they were like, I don't know. I won the EuroLeague last year, but I need to win it again next year. Last year doesn't count. The moment they won something, they moved on straight away. They had to. And the thing for them is that they weren't sure. We called it, these serial winners suffered from serial insecurity. Despite so much winning, one of them said to me, I get up every morning and my first thing is, can I do it again? Am I good enough to do it again? They were constantly trying to prove themselves. But that was not a bad thing for them. They didn't panic. It was just extra motivation of that. Doubting themselves was the source of going to work extra hard for things. Okay? Driven, number 4, all in commitment. These guys don't mess about. They're all in. They've banked everything in their life into this. So they take no half measures. They go all out. And that makes them proactive and decisive decision makers. They don't wait around. They don't wait for things to happen. They make things happen. Yesterday, as I was on the train coming from Geneva, one of my assistant coaches, Mike, sent me a text. You've got to read this. You've got to read this. And he sent me a link to an article about buffaloes and cows. Okay, does anybody know what I'm talking about? Buffaloes and cows. I didn't know until yesterday. Well, as it happens, in Kansas, in the States, apparently it's the only state where cows and buffaloes kind of share the same patch, okay? And Kansas has lots of storms because of the way the land lies, okay, and the mountains. So when the storm comes, okay, the buffaloes and the cows react in two different ways. The cows run away from the storm, okay? And the buffaloes run into the storm. What's the best strategy? Buffaloes, right? Because running away from the storm still catches up with you. So you end up running with the storm. So you are in the storm for longer. Whereas the buffaloes run straight through the storm, so they spend less time in the painful area. As coaches, how many times do we run away from the storm? And we end up in the middle of the storm for longer. These guys were always running into the storm. They are the buffaloes of coaching. When there is a problem, straight away they try and fix it. They don't let it become bigger. They don't run away from it. And that makes them take some risks, okay? Calculated risks. An example, the Dutch coach that I was talking about before, in a winter sport, guess what? When he retired from playing, from being an athlete, he took a job. Where? Winter sport, right? In the Caribbean. Okay? It's like Cool Runnings, like that. Have you seen that movie, Cool Runnings? Okay? It was just like that. And he said, yeah, I took that job because I couldn't coach to save my life. So I needed to go coach somewhere where I could make mistakes and learn to coach. Because if I'd coached in the Netherlands, I would have lasted 2 months because the pressure would have been so high, and on the first mistake, I would have been gone. So he took a massive risk. He had a job in the Netherlands. He went to the Caribbean to coach ice skating in the Caribbean, okay? So there you go, calculated risk. We've talked about vision already. These guys are very driven. They know where they're going. So they see into the future. They simplify complexity. Okay. They plan. Okay, they really plan. And really important, and we talked about communication. You've been talking about communication. They share the vision. There's no point in having a vision if no one else knows about it. Okay? And we'll talk about that a bit more later. I'm going to move a bit quicker because I know we're running a bit late. And I've got a train to catch and a plane to catch. Benevolence. Okay, so we looked at the driven, benevolence. Very clear, people first. It's a people business. Coaching is a social activity. We coach people. So we have to really put the person before the athlete. Balance between challenge and support, as we said before. Because athletes, if we don't do that, either won't perform or they will move away. They go somewhere else. Because athletes now don't stick with coaches unless they feel it's the right thing. It's not like 20 years ago. Athletes are much more powerful, and rightly so. And the athletes want the coaches to be dependable and stable. They don't want coaches that are a bundle of nerves every day. They don't want coaches that they don't know what to expect from. So they really want us to be dependable and stable. And for that, we need to be emotionally and socially intelligent. Okay? And again, that's something that you've been talking about a lot over the last 2 days. But also these coaches wanted to understand. If you want to be understood, you first have to seek to understand other people. Why do we need to understand our athletes? You guys are putting your athletes through hell. You're asking them to do things that are really hard. So we need to tap into their own internal motivations. We need to understand why they do this so we can play to their strengths. What these guys were saying, and don't get me wrong, these guys don't make decisions by committee or by consensus, but they really share leadership with the athletes. They want athletes to own their own training, to own their own results. So they use more persuasion than imposition. And there is definitely a tilted balance there. And the coaches were saying that when they started coaching, they were much more on the imposition side of things. But over the years, they realized that persuasion and getting people to really understand why you're doing things was more important. And that led them to take considered decisions. Okay? So coaches really wanted to and they said it like this, I get paid to make really hard decisions every day. But I just want my athletes to understand that before I make a decision, I've considered all the consequences. And the athletes said the same thing. They were happy to live with tough decisions, providing they knew the coach had thought about it. Okay? And again, in your reflection exercise, you were looking at Homer Simpson. We saw that a lot of the coaches had a big part of Homer Simpson that allowed them to realize that however bad the previous day was, the sun is always going to rise the following day. So they were very optimistic, serial optimists. Okay? They get over setbacks really quickly because they haven't got time to dwell on things. And we called it that they have a thick skin. That's an English expression where it means you're tough, really. When things hit you, they slip off you. Okay? But also an elastic heart. Okay? They take emotions in, recognize them, and let them go. Okay? Of course, they get upset sometimes, don't get me wrong. They're not saints. But they really make an effort to, as we say there, try and keep a flat tone. One of the coaches said, look, when I lose, I don't spend 10 days in a hole, and when I win, I don't spend the full month drinking champagne. You got to be like this, because this will kill you. And just accept reality. We work in high-performance sport. It is beautiful. It's complex. It's dynamic. It's up and down. And the moment we don't feel that way, it means that we're no longer working in that environment, which is what we all love. So accept the reality and work with it. So just a summary there of driven benevolence. And 2 quotes. So driven. Friedrich Nietzsche, I don't know if I pronounced that properly, okay? But he said, those who have a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. If I know why I'm doing something and that is valuable, that's worth it, I'll find a way to do it. That's what being driven is about. But then the benevolence is this idea of nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So that kind of summarizes the idea of driven benevolence. But why is this driven benevolence style an important part for the coaches? Okay, what is the benefit of a driven benevolence style? We saw that what this gave the coaches was cognitive and emotional flexibility. And what does that mean? Cognitive flexibility. It allows them to become chameleons. Because they move along this continuum, they're not tied up to the same set of behaviors every time. They can do what the situation and the athlete requires. They can change their color to fit the situation. That makes them more creative because they don't have to do the same thing all the time. And it makes them very self-aware because they know themselves really well, which leads to a lot of self-control. And it makes them quick learners. They always talked about they took pride in learning and learning quick. But it also gives them emotional flexibility. Remember this idea of the sun always rises. If every time we take a knock, we really feel it bad, it's going to be a tough life as a high-performance coach. Because we know, and excuse the camera, that the only certainty of a coach is that shit happens. Okay? And it happens all the time. So enjoy the roller coaster. You're going to live another day. No matter how bad the day is, the sun's always going to rise. And be compassionate. When things go wrong, have compassion for others, but most importantly, to yourself. Be good to yourself. Okay? So now we have the full picture. Strong values and beliefs lead to driven benevolence, lead to cognitive and emotional flexibility, which lead to flexible and adaptable coaching behaviors, which is what we want. We want to be able to coach the way we need to coach depending on what the athlete needs at that particular time. The question we should be always asking ourselves is, what do I need to do now to help my athlete the most? It's not what do I want to do, it's what do I need to do to help the athlete. Now, that's probably the most disturbing slide I've ever shown. Okay? So what? Okay, your opinion is wrong. Okay? What does that mean in the context of the last 2 days for you? So very quickly, You've been talking about winning. Yeah, winning definitely matters. Okay, and for these guys, it's like a personal vendetta. But let's not forget that they still have a desire to help their athletes, and that winning at all costs does not count for these guys. Okay, you win in a particular way. The environment is about creating the right environment and then let it happen. If we get that right, it's not that success is inevitable, because that's not possible, because everybody's trying to win. But at least success is possible and likely. People changing behaviors. Actually, they went, yeah, we want to change behaviors, but actually we want to try and get the best people in the room before we actually have to change their behaviors. So we don't have to change so many behaviors. Okay? But they talk about changing behaviors through the culture, through learning the culture, through persuasion. Emotions and communication. I'm not going to read all of that. I'm going to read one thing. Bad communication destroys good people. Okay, you could be the best coach in the world and have the best intention, but if you don't communicate properly, difficult job. Okay, so be proactive in your communication. That's what these guys were saying. Run into the storm and going digital. There's no two ways about it. We're going digital. But we need to know why and how. It's not that we have to go digital because we can. We need to have people that are going to help us understand when we need to go digital and use technology and how we use it. Because there's so many things that we could do, but we don't have to do them all. Remember complexity, we don't have to do them all. And innovation, 3 kinds of innovation these guys talk about. The crystal ball, so just looking into the future, where is the game, where is the sport going, what do I need to do next? But also they look back, because in the past there are some great ideas that people have used in the past and have been forgotten, particularly in team sports, okay? But also this idea of disruptive innovation. All of a sudden coming up with an idea that is completely different to everything else, okay? Like Uber or Netflix, destroying the market because they do something completely different. So I think this is the final slide. I'm just going to leave you with a quote from The Little Prince, Le Petit Prince, okay? In his travels between planets, he gets to this planet where there is one king and no one else. And the king is trying to get him to stay in the planet. And he says, I'll make you the minister of justice. Yeah, but there's no one to judge in this planet. And he says, yeah, you can judge yourself. And if you can judge yourself, that is the most difficult thing of all. It is far more difficult to judge oneself than to judge others. And if you succeed in judging yourself rightly, then indeed you're a very wise man. So I'm going to leave you with that. Self-reflect, because if you can judge yourself rightly, you'll be a massive asset to your athletes. Thank you very much. That's everything. Thank you.